In this interview with the former Finders class member, Gordon Harris, we're going to talk about his experiences with the Course and his experiences with Persistent Non-Symbolic Experience. So first of all, welcome, Gordon.
Thank you.
Let's start with the obvious question that I think everybody asks right away, which is, who were you before? How did the world, how did you experience the world before? What type of person were you before? And then how has that all changed?
My experience with keeping it just to the Course, I had already gone through some pretty major changes in my life. When we began the Course, I feel like I was in a really good place. I'd been practicing a lot of the stuff found in God Formula and some release techniques that were mentioned in subsequent YouTube videos, etc., that you'd kind of mentioned, focusing techniques, Sedona method I kind of touched on, and a few others. And I was in a really, I think, good place. I was happy, newly married, had a great job, a very nice house. And the Finders Course, I think, really just kind of helped push me over that last kind of hurdle. Something I'd been looking for my whole life, really, was this transcendent experience that I'd read about and heard about, and all of my great heroes, all had experiences with. And I was very intrigued by that. What does that look like? How does that feel? What would that experience be like? Would that be something that would be useful in my life? Would it be something that, once you have that experience, then you have that sort of stereotypical, go up into the mountain cave and, shun humanity and, that kind of stuff? Or would it be something a little more along the lines of reinvigorate you to service to the community and be kind of a Mother Teresa, Gandhi type, thing? I didn't really know. But my whole life, I remember from being a small child thinking about that and wanting to have those experiences that I'd sort of heard about or read about. And so the Finders Course, I had this, I allowed myself to have the expectation that I was going to have the experience through taking the Course. And I didn't tell anybody about it. I was afraid that people were going to laugh at me and say, well, that's just silly. That's just, you have a 3-month course. There's no way that you're going to have this kind of experience. Certainly not something that might stay with you. And I had no idea that there were techniques to have the experience, to just kind of sort of try it on like a good suit, and just say, oh, well, that's what it feels like. That's really nice. So going through the Course was a culmination of a lot of things for me, and I don't think that that there's anything fundamentally different about me. I don't really view the world in a fundamentally different way. I don't believe that I react completely different than I used to react. I think of it more as kind of polishing something that I've been working on for a long time. And the biggest differences today that I see are at my work and interacting with people and clients at work. And my boss, my frontline supervisor, is particularly difficult at times. And I have the experience today where I'm able to clearly see kind of what's going on with other people and not get this stickiness of this personal attachment to, sort of their drama or their reaction to life, to not get caught in that. And, just like water off a duck's back, and, I'm able to just clearly see my part in it, and, do what I can do, to help them, to help the situation, and to move forward. And, yeah, it's been a real gift. I work with people who are trying to make changes in their lives. I work in a wilderness therapy environment, and some of the people that, some of the clients that I work with can be very difficult. Some of these people are here against their will. So, you can easily sort of allow your mind to imagine what some of those scenarios, are like. And, stepping across that last sort of threshold, although there's, sort of more there to experience that I haven't really experienced, has been a real blessing in my job. In my personal life as well, but in my job is where I see the most difference, I guess.
So you feel like it's made you actually more effective at work?
Absolutely, yes. Of all the things that I do today, I talk about my meditation practice. I talk about my prayers. I talk about the things that I do on a daily basis to be a better human being. And and I've tried so many different ones, and many of them have I've tried and I've discarded, or they've been useful to me for a period of time, and then I've moved along and onto something else. And I constantly look at those things, and I ask myself, is my life better today because of that practice? Is my life, the experience of my life, the relationships within my life, how I am at work, how I am at home, how I am as a father, how I am as a son, how I am as a husband? And if they're not, then, chances are I'm going to discard it and, look at something else. And, or just, pick up another practice to integrate into it. Maybe there's something there still of value that I don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But that's another part of the Finder's Course, is it allowed me to look at so many different techniques and so many different ways of improving my life and my personal relationships, and how I interact with the world around me, and how I internalize that. And it's just, it's awesome. It's really awesome. I particularly like the ascension technique, especially in what I do and how I experience the world. It's been a terrific value to me.
Yeah, that's a great one for sure, especially for tuning that, what you're talking about. How did you know you made that final transition?
I knew there was something that had happened. I don't think that I knew that this had happened or that had happened, that I could put this label on it or that label on it. And I wasn't really interested in putting the particular label on it. I just knew that I felt really good and I felt different. And I had this sort of experience while I was out at work. So I was sort of out of electronic connection with the world and out in the wilderness. And I had this experience. And what it looked like was I was about 2/3 of the way through my work rotation, which is an 8-day rotation. And for the first, 5-6 days or so, I was reacting the way I was normally reacting. I was interacting with the students and the staff the way that I normally would. And I laid down for my meditation, and I had the Sri Yanta. I was able to bring my little iPod Nano mini shuffle thing out with me. Terrific battery life,
That's Jeffrey Coulson's Sri Yantra audio track.
I love the Sri Yantra, yeah. It was great. And I was doing the eraser technique, one of the hollow scan and something about that particular day or that particular meditation, and I knew something had happened. I didn't really know what it was or what to call it. I wasn't really interested in labeling it in any particular way, but for the rest of the day and for the rest of the rotation, I was happier. I was lighter. I was joking more. I was, stuff that I would normally kind of take offense to or get personally involved in. I just didn't, and everyone kind of commented on it a little. And they were like, "Wow, like you're having a really good day." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm having a really good day," And then I came out of the field, and I had missed the headless way technique that we had discussed, and so I was kind of getting caught up on that. I was sitting here at my desk, and I was doing the point away, and a little bit closer, my knee and my chest, and then my face, and I realized that after I did that, and I sort of had that sort of headless way experience that they talk about, and then I went off about my day, and I would sort of do that again every once in a while. I'd be like, wow, it's still there. It's really cool, And I went to some meetings, and I went downtown, and I hung out with my wife for a while, and did some other things. And each morning when I woke up, I was sort of waiting for that experience to end. I was thinking, okay, well, that was a really nice experience, But I would wake up, and I was laying there in bed going through my morning practices, and just I would giggle, and I would just pull my hand up out of the sheets, and I would do this, and I'd sort of turn that eye back inside again, and I would giggle again, and my wife was like, get out of bed, go do your day, quit bothering me, And so I would just get up and I'd go out about the day, and then we talked a couple days later, and you helped me kind of to identify and okay, what is that, and where I was at, and those kinds of things, and that was really nice. Read back through the manuscript, and that kind of helped me identify kind of what I was feeling and what I was experiencing and what I wasn't. And that was really, I think, in looking at it, was the thing that stood out. It wasn't so much what my experience was, but what my experience wasn't. And it just wasn't those personal stickiness that I was experiencing before, not in the same way, and the fears that I would have. You would think, okay, well, I need to change the tires on the car, not because I have a fear that I'm going to have a blowout, and then my mind would, create this scenario of, all this stuff, and I'd roll over, and, or I'd be stranded on the side of the road, or, whatever. I would just be like, oh, yeah, I need to change the tires in the car because it's time. No other, there wasn't anything else to it, no other internal storyline to it, Paul, I love talking to Paul after he had his step through, and there was a plane flying overhead, and he was talking about how annoying it was. But then he talked about how before he would make up this whole story about the people on the plane and where they were going and the kids fighting on the plane and all this stuff, and I had to laugh because I could relate, It's very much like that, Oh, there's a plane, it's annoying, but and then it goes, and I'm still here, and everything's okay.
Paul actually told that story, which is awesome. Oh man! Any other benefits that you can think of to mention? What other benefits? You just listed off a whole ton of them, but before we move on, I just want to make sure you're not leaving anything on the cutting room floor there. You did mention something relationship-wise. What has been a change from a relationship standpoint?
I feel closer. I feel more connected to my wife, to my son, to my mother, to the people close around me, and to just sort of people in everyday, people at the meetings that I attend, people at work, clients. I feel a deeper and closer connection with them, especially the compassion that I feel. And I don't know that. So I've been tested Asperger on the Asperger scale, and my son tests there. And so one of the things that I've worked on most of my life is catching those cues, those social cues, and having more compassion for others, because it's just not a natural thing for me. I don't believe that it's necessarily a really natural trait for me. And so having that today, and I believe that I've worked on that for sure, but stepping over, there isn't the same judgments and the same storyline that I would have before, and it's just sort of opens another channel to receive what is going on in the world around me, in each moment. And a big part of my life is my relationships, and being able to receive, what's going on with those people, and to have that connection, that heart-to-heart connection and compassion with what's going on with them. My wife will be having a particularly hard day, and she'll be telling me about it, when she gets home. And before, I would kind of pay attention, and I would kind of pretend like, oh yeah, it really sucks. That's too bad, And the whole time, like, I'm thinking about, like, judgment about the people that she's interacting with, about, her taking things personally, about, and I might even say, well, you should have done this, or you should have, and not intending to be kind of a jerk, but, trying to sort of fix the problem, etc. I think, I have a tendency to do that. And now when she tells me about these particularly troublesome days, or a particularly troublesome client that she's had, I can just feel how she's feeling, and I can just have compassion and sympathy for what she's feeling, and at the same time I can feel a great deal of love for her, and a great deal of love that she feels, and care for the world and why she feels that way, and I connect with the emotion that she's experiencing on a really deep level, and sometimes it really surprises me. When I first stepped over, we were watching a movie. I think it was later. I think it was the next day. We had just have this little love seat, leather couch thing, and usually she lays with her legs up on me, on my lap. But this time she was laying sort of against me, and her head kind of in my arm here. We were watching this movie, and I had this experience that kind of scared me, where I was experiencing her emotion in the moment while she was watching the movie, and I was just like, whoa, that's, like, I didn't know what to do with that. I was just, but it was it kind of scared me, because I'd never had that experience before, and I didn't really know what to do with it. And yeah, but that was very fleeting. The rest of the night, I told her about it. We talked about it, and I've had many more of those experiences, and they've just become normal. So it's not abnormal. It's not a scary thing today. It's just, oh wow, you're really having a bad day. I can just really sympathize, and I can empathize, and have compassion and love and care, and not sit there and judge. And that's been really cool. It's been really cool, especially with my mother. My mother is older now and has this sort of need to connect, I think, deeper with her children and her grandchildren and the world around her. Her husband just died recently, and she's kind of alone. And it used to just annoy me, quite frankly. I just would get annoyed with these phone calls from my mother, gosh, just leave me alone, you know. I'm a grown man, leave me alone. You know? And now I feel what she's feeling, and I can be there for her, and not just sort of in a, you know, this is okay, this is the right thing to say, and just sort of stay on the phone and, you know, distract myself with websites, you know, clicking around and just kind of go, yeah, 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 you know, kind of thing. But instead, like, really pay attention to what is going on in her life, and pay attention to the moment and what she's experiencing. And yeah, it's just been really good.
Wow, that's awesome. You know, as I talk to people about this, there's some interesting things that come up around it, right? And one of them I think you've already dispelled a little bit. There's a fear in people that if they let go of their fear or their discomfort or their negative emotions or whatever, that they won't be as motivated, basically. That, you know, somehow they'll just sort of sink into a couch or sit on a porch and stare out at the scenery, and that'll be the ballgame. But you were referencing earlier that you feel like it's actually made you more effective at work, which doesn't sound like you're just sitting on in your case, I've been there recently, your back deck or your back porch area, staring off into the beautiful scenery where you live. So you know, what would you say to people that have that kind of fear?
It hasn't been my experience, although I have had some of the things that I really connected with, I sort of dropped away from. So I'm a big fight fan. I've always been a big fight fan, martial arts, boxing, wrestling, mixed martial arts, and movies and music and stuff. And after I had my transition, I had a good period of time where I just didn't find a lot of joy and happiness that I used to find in those things. You know, that it wasn't the same anymore, and there was definitely a change there, and that kind of bothered me. I would spend a little bit of time sort of sitting around, wondering what I should be doing instead of doing the things that I'd always done before. Not necessarily feeling bad, but not having the same draw, you know, to distract myself and to be entertained, and you know, to have this thing. I still watch the fights. I still sort of keep up with them, and I'll still watch a movie with my wife, you know, from time to time. But I'm just as comfortable today not doing those things as doing those things. And in my day-to-day activities, I feel much more effective in just about everything that I do. Not because I'm smarter, and not because I'm better informed, and not because I've suddenly grown a third limb that I can, you know, manipulate other things with or something, but just because I can be more in the moment, and I can be more attentive to whatever it is that I choose to do. And sometimes it's sitting out on the back porch and you know, just watching the birds, you know. So I feel even when I'm relaxing and just not really doing anything, that I have more enjoyment out of the experience. If I'm doing laundry, it's just fine. I tend to make less mistakes in putting the cold stuff in the hot water and, you know, stuff like that, because my mind isn't constructing all this other stuff, and I'm not thinking about all the things that I should be doing instead of doing the thing that I'm doing. My desk isn't any cleaner, and you know, the dogs don't get walked, you know, more often, and you know, the laundry does still wait, and I still just do it once a week, you know, and you know, so. But in each moment, in each thing that I do, I feel that there's more enjoyment in doing it, and and I'm more effective in when I decide to do it. And yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, yeah, and certainly that everyone, I think, goes through that period of unwinding of conditioning a little bit, where you're just sort of habituated plopping down in front of a movie or plopping down in front of whatever, and yet all of a sudden that doesn't seem to be the thing to do.
Yeah.
So that sort of post PNSE or post transition to PNSE integration, I think, is very interesting. And it's going to be, I think, increasingly interesting to have these honest, open conversations about it, and over time get to a really good, strong body of knowledge that helps people to ease into those transitions, because it's very similar for everyone. I mean, I basically hear the same stories from everyone throughout the 8 years of research. The other thing that I would say that I've seen in terms of fear-wise is you had worked extraordinarily hard on yourself up to the point where you took the course. I mean, you had really done an enormous amount of work on yourself up to that point. And I think that there's a sense that I hear from people who are in that situation, and they hear a little bit about PNSE, and they hear a little bit about this idea of, a shift in what it feels like to be you, a shift in your sense of self. And it scares them because they think to themselves, well, I've done so much. I really like who I am right now. I'm in a good place in my life. It's kind of the contrary to the other fear of losing the negative emotions, for fear of losing your motivations. So there's a fear, I think, of people losing themselves, if you will, and all of the hard work that they've put into themselves and all of that. And you obviously read tons of literature about this beforehand, and so you had seen all sort of the same things. They're dressed up in sort of maybe spiritual type clothing or whatever. I'm curious, what would you say to somebody with that type of concern?
That their concern is that they've done a lot of work and like who they are. Is that correct? And they're worried about?
Yeah, and even if you read and hear one of my talks or something, I talk about a transition away from an individualized narrative sense of self, which we've just heard descriptions of, very apt descriptions of from you, on the narrative side especially so far, to something else. And I think that there's a fear that, well, that transition sounds scary. I mean, what do you mean I go away or whatever?
Yeah, I can understand where someone would have that fear or that thought. There was a guy at work that I talked to a lot about this, and suggested that he read God Formula and a few other things. And in our discussion, he said pretty much the same thing. He said he's about my age, a little bit older maybe, and he said that he'd gotten to this point in his life where he really liked himself, and that he didn't want to let go of that sense of who he had become. And I could relate to that. I don't know too much to say to that, other than to maybe talk to a few people who have had the experience. There isn't anyone in any of the literature that I've read through, or in our class interaction, or in any of the teachers that we've had on, who has said, wow, I really wish I wouldn't have gone through that transition. Who said, wow, I really want to go back to that ego-identified sense of me, and this really wonderful sense of well-being and extraordinary sense of being present in this moment, and all these things that sort of come with that. Yeah, I don't really want that. The other part of my world is interacting with people who are in recovery, And with them, I can easily sort of step them through that, and I can say, well, you know, who you are or who you were when you were drinking or using, would you want to go back to that? Would you want to go back to, you know, because there's a lot of fear there when someone gets clean or they get sober. You know, who am I going to be? Because this is the person that I've known for so long. Who will I become if I am no longer, you know, this sense of me that I've built up over this long period of time? Gosh, am I just going to be boring? You know, am I going to be one of those, you know, stump on the logs, you know, people who don't have any fun, and you know, am I going to be one of those people? You know, and the people who have gone through that and they find that they love themselves even more, and you know, they are so much more effective at work. They hold jobs down. They're so much more effective as, you know, a spouse or a son or a husband, or you know, whatever role it is that they have in their life. You know, they're just better, and better in every measurable or conceivable way. And you know, I always tell people, you know, that once you go through that, if you want, you can go back. You can always go back. You can always go back to that same person that you always were. And I believe that that's probably true with the PNSE as well, although I've never attempted it. But I believe that you could probably step back as well. I've heard in some of the literature, and you've mentioned that, where some people have, and there's probably very specific ways of doing that. I think extremely low blood sugar over a period of time, or illness or something, you know, might do it. You know, so it's a little like trying it out, I guess. You know, like you know, maybe I don't know, going parachuting for the first time. You know, you might have a lot of fear of heights, or a lot of fear of, you know, well, what if the parachute doesn't open? What if, you know, all this kind of stuff? And then you go and you do it, and you're like, whoa, that was so amazing. That was like the most amazing thing ever. Wow, let's do that again. You know, yeah, you know, and or riding a roller coaster or something. You know, there's you can talk about it, but until you actually have the experience, you can't really compare it to, you know, sort of not. And you know, I would just encourage people to have the experience, because you can have the experience without having the persistence of it. Certainly through the Finder's Course, you know, through the Sperry technique, and through a couple others, you can have the experience. You can say, wow, okay, so that's what that is like. That's what that feels like. You know? And
Right.
then you can decide whether or not that's something that you want to pursue and make a part of your normal everyday waking life, or whether, you know, not. Wow, that felt really good. I never really want to do that again. You know, or which, you know, I've had enough experiences in this world to know that there probably are a few people, you know, who would say that. You know, there's all kinds, for sure. You know, and maybe this isn't for everybody. You know, I understand that as well.
It is a good point, I think, that we do structure the course so that we try to give a very sort of safe series of tastes of different angles on it and stuff. Yeah, as early in the course as possible. So that's actually a really good point. That's a really good point. And of course, you're right. You know, there are ways to snap people out of it. I don't think there will ever be a call for a course to be created that does that. But I mean, you never know. You know, who's to say? It's a strange world out there sometimes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What have you noticed any change in your overall life goals?
Yes, but not in sort of what goal to set per se, but in so in going through the Finder's Course and in talking with my mentor, in setting those goals about 2 years out, 5 years out, etc. What I realized was, in a deep knowing sense, rather than just having them sort of written out and, you know, sure, I'd really like to do that, or, you know, I'd like to attain that someday. I would like to work towards that. Instead, there's just a very deep knowing that if that's what I want, that's the interesting thing is, instead of doing, you know, in the God formula, I went back through and I reread that here just a little while back. I had a very quick read, you know, very easy read, and realized that I don't do the practices, you know, okay, I'm gonna, you know, create this and it's gonna, you know, all the little sensory things and create the outcome, you know, experience. I just sort of say, this is what I want. And the universe just kind of manifests that in a very easy way, you know. So like, I needed a new top bone for my fire making kit, and it has to be from the ankle bone or the knee bone of an herbivore. So, you know, a deer, an elk, a cow, etc. And I felt the need to give away the one that I'd had for a long time. And so I gave it to the student, and we had the ceremony, and it was really cool. And so 2 days later, as I was walking along the forest, and I had just left the student, and I was wondering, I wonder where I'm going to get my next top bone. I came across this animal, and I was like, perfect. Pulled out my knife, and I cut the bone out, and I cured it out in the sun, and, you know, I mean, that just happens now on just a regular basis. It's just, you know, like how I stumbled into the course, you know, and getting bit by the dog, and how that synchronicity just happens today. It's just, and it's not weird to me anymore. You know, that's the funny thing is, it's like, oh, of course, it's exactly the way that was supposed to happen, and it could not have happened any other way, you know. And it's just my normal everyday experience now today, and my normal everyday expectation, I guess.
Let me ask you about spirituality and religion. You know, one of the things that happens sometimes is that when people transition into PNSE, there's like this sense of divinity. Other people have a sense of sort of everything being consciousness or alive or more alive or something along those lines. I'm just curious, did you experience anything, you know, along those lines, change-wise, or?
Yeah, I sure have. Yeah, I am probably more of an atheist today than I am anything else, and it's interesting that it. And I say atheist, although if I explained sort of my everyday experience, maybe someone else would say, oh, wow, that's like a deep connection with, you know, higher power and stuff. And I use that language, higher power, often. And there are definitely, you know, in recovery, there's that definite sense that you require something that is outside of yourself or something greater than yourself. But once you truly know yourself, you also know that there is this sameness, this connection, this oneness with everything. And so thinking in those terms of, I like the phrase union with God. I'd never really thought that I had that experience, and I wouldn't necessarily describe my experience today as that, but I like that sort of that language. You know, if God is in the literature described as either he is everything, else he is nothing, and if that's true, then, you know, going deeply into this, you have that experience, not just the experience, but the knowledge, the sort of everyday knowledge that you are deeply embedded in this thing, this energy field that someone might describe as being God or higher power or whatever wording makes sense to them. I say that I'm an atheist today just because there isn't really anything in any of the other literature from other religions, established religions, that use the word God that we use in the West that I would connect with. That doesn't necessarily invalidate any of that. That's just not sort of my experience or my belief per se. And I talk about today that a couple of years ago I had some hope that there was, something more out there when I was deeply suffering, that I didn't have to suffer in that way anymore. And then I started to kind of come out of that suffering and sort of learn a bit more about who I am and sort of drop some of those really bad self-destructive habits that I had. And then I was starting to get some faith that my life was going to get better. And it did. And then after a period of time, I just had the experience of a better life and an experience of a connection with the world around me. And then through the Finder's Course, it became, instead of just being an individualized experience, it just became my everyday waking experience, my knowledge, that I'm just deeply connected with all of this, and somebody was talking about describing God, and then they described God as being sort of all things in the past, all things in the future, something that can neither be created nor destroyed. Anyway, in this way, and then they described energy, and they used exactly the same definition for energy. And I really liked that. I thought, oh, that's awesome. That's really awesome. And I like that idea. I like that idea that it's this huge energy field, that the universe really is. That the no thing is the space in which the energy arises and manifests itself, and that I'm sort of a physical manifestation inside that no thing, and this energy field, I'm a part of all of that, and deeply connected with all the other things around me. And it's really sort of cool to have that that experience. But I don't have necessarily a belief in any particular thing, and so I believe, and it's interesting. I still pray. And I use the word God when I pray. I do a 3rd step prayer and a 11th step prayer on a regular basis today. And my practice, the ascension practice, comes from the Christian contemplative tradition. I mean, it's an interesting sort of dichotomy, I guess. I don't know, but I don't think too much about it. I don't really care to label it in any particular way. It's just it just is, and and I am, and I don't have any particular need to go much beyond that. It's all good.
So what made this different than other things that you've tried? It seems like you've really been through a lot of different things, and you've really had a lot of amazing transformative experiences up to this point. But you mentioned that this was sort of the thing that pushed you over and gave you that thing that you've been looking for the whole time through sort of maybe all of the other things or whatever. So what, in your mind, what really made this different than those other things?
When we first started in, it was very apparent to me that the intention, if I so wished it, was to find a system or a technology within the course that would enable me to step over, to awaken, or etc. Not just to I don't know, sort of clean out the closet, or to learn how to do some biofeedback, or, I mean, there's plenty of other things that I've done that have been helpful for sure, but nothing else really said, hey, this is a way for you to cross over to the other shore, so to speak. And from the very beginning, in my own mind, and I think in the minds of the rest of the people in the class, there was that belief that this is a way to do that. And we were kind of open about it. And some of us sort of talked, sort of openly about it. And then, in the beginning, we were just, kind of dredging the bottom of the river, kind of allowing our neural pathways to be ready to sort of rewire, and then experiencing some of that with some of the sparing techniques and et cetera. And it was very apparent that this was, not just a pipe dream, that this was something that had been looked at, and information had been gathered, and these are the ways in which Western scientific methodologies have said that, hey, this is a way to cross over, and the most effective, ways to do that. And so, yeah, I think everything else that I'd kind of looked at was just more of, hey, this is something that worked for me, or this will help you deal with some guilt, or here's a technique, to help you to reduce your fear of being in front of people, stage fright stuff, biofeedback, techniques, and of course 12 steps and all that. And of course, it was everything that I've tried has been very helpful, and I've certainly gotten something out of each thing, even if it's just, hey, this isn't really for me, and now I can move on to the next thing. And to say that, the sort of the questions is a little loaded in sort of making an assumption that there's anything out there that's even closely approximated to what I went through. Perhaps there is. I don't know. But of all the other systems that I've looked at and have been interested in, those are, like it would be a retreat for 6 months or something, in Thailand, or something that it was very difficult to, for me personally to go to and to be involved in. And so the advent of this technology and being able to do this, group stuff via internet connections and stuff is really cool. I mean, obviously we couldn't have done it, this way 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So that's super cool. I hear about some retreats now that are sort of in-home retreats, that kind of like what we did. And I don't know exactly how they work or how they look, but I really doubt that they explore anything more than just a single technique. And that was really big to me as well, because in the beginning I would, if you would have asked me to write down, of the techniques I'm familiar with, what I think would be the most helpful to me, and I was familiar with several, and several that we used, but I hadn't, several I hadn't heard of, and they were absolutely instrumental in me stepping over. Headless Way, I'd never heard of that. And the Ascension technique that I use today, I'd never heard of that either. I think there were several things about the Course that are fairly unique, if not outright unique in this sort of contemplative practice and course. I haven't heard of anything quite like it before, although there are different aspects. I think you drew a little bit from here and a little bit from there, and to put something together, that just didn't look like anything else. Extremely effective and extremely helpful. And I felt also towards the end of the first part of the course that if I got nothing else out of it, I had just some of the best experiences. and especially the positive psychology practices that I just did every day. I could tell at the end of the day whether or not I had really had that intent at the beginning of the day to have that high five, doing a little dance, kind of day. And there were a couple days when I had to start my day quicker than I normally would, and had to kind of avoid doing that. And not necessarily, that wasn't my intention, but at the end of the day, I could really feel it. I was like, oh. And then oh gosh, what is it? The random acts of kindness. I think that was my favorite day. And if there's one suggestion I have for the course, is to have a couple of those things. It's like 1 month in, 2 months in, or something along the line, just spaced out, just appropriately. That was just awesome. I had such a high feeling from that, such a sense of connection with my community from doing that. It was really cool. Yeah.
So, overall, the idea of the Finder's Course was to help people find the most effective methods for them and figure out what those might be. And of course, in the research, we learned that basically there were two important components. One was finding a method that really worked for the maximum number of people, and no method works for everyone, it seems. And oftentimes, the most effective methods maybe work for like 10 or 15% of people that try them, and those are pretty rare. So you had to sort of find a method, or at least find a category of methods, and then maybe one of the top 1 or 2 methods in there that work for a higher percentage than other things. Most things, of course, seem to work for nobody, or virtually nobody. And then the other thing is finding the ones that match to you. Basically finding the ones that are synced up to you. Some of the stuff in the course is really like that. It's like a contemporary, next generation, evolved version of different things that really sort of rose to the top in terms of their category had to be very effective, and then the technique itself had to be very effective. So it's fascinating because some of the stuff is like really, really super old, millennial old type stuff, and then other things are later evolutions of kind of really hundreds of years old or millennial old stuff, and then other things are like totally brand new in like the last few years. So it's this incredible sort of complex mix of things, right?
I think too that the way that they were married with the eraser technique and with some of the other positive psychology stuff just made it what you would call a kind of turbocharge, in a way. It might have been that we could have studied 8 other different techniques, but I really think that eraser technique to sort of scramble those neurons, to allow them, to accept a new wiring, and to have some practices where you step into the awakened mode of being and have that experience, and then, okay, here's some other, techniques that you can use to continue the process of stepping across on a more permanent basis. I think that, and of course, it's just sort of maybe my gut reaction or my gut feeling to it all. But I think that was just absolutely invaluable. We could have spent a much longer period of time just studying the techniques, and I don't think that we would have gotten the same results that we did get. I also think that if I would have approached this from a book or some other sort of methodology, I probably would have just kind of played at it more than anything else. One, coming from having read God Formula and having done the practices and having had great experiences with it. And then I went through your YouTube videos for the middle portion of that. So I also came to this with some connection with the continuum, and kind of moving along and progressing along that. So so that my level of commitment once I got to the course was probably higher than it would have been had I just said, oh, hi Jeffrey, what's what is all this stuff that you got going on here or something. One other thing on the time commitment. I heard someone else, I don't remember who, but I think I was listening to Buddhist Geeks, and somebody on one of those podcasts was talking about their transition. One of the few places where I'd actually heard people actually talk about their experiences crossing over and what that was like and stuff. And somebody had said, if I would have known what it was like stepping across, I would have done it 20 years ago. Regardless of the time commitment, regardless of the financial commitment, regardless of anything, we think, gosh, an hour and a half out of my day, or whatever. But what's the payoff? The payoff is so much more than I think what we think it is. It's not just the knowledge payoff here, for sure, and it's something that stays with you for. And then you can utilize and apply it in every aspect of your life. It really becomes sort of a defining characteristic, I think, of your experience of that life. People ask me how I'm doing today. Hey, Gordo, how is it today? How are you doing today? And I say, blessed and highly favored, and blessed and highly favored. And I really have that as my experience.
Is there any downside that you see to transitioning to persistent non-symbolic experience?
I guess that depends on just how attached you are to your pain.
That's a fair point.
That was something that was really kind of hard for me to swallow, and was just how attached, just how personally attached I was to suffering, to my own pain, and that it must be that way because I would actively feed it, from time to time when it would come up, and then I would recognize it, In the last few years of sort of going through this process, I would get more and more aware of when that was coming up, and a technique that I learned was that cancel technique, and utilizing that, and then each time sort of being aware of, wow, like I really am generating that pain. I'm really keeping it alive. What do they call it? Kicking the wheel. I think one of the Eastern traditions talks about that. Yeah, understanding that's what I was doing, that I was kicking that wheel. I was keeping that pain alive, and then being ready to let it go, to say, well, and I think really that's where the trepidation comes in the change. I am so personally attached to this pain. I'm so personally attached to these fears. If I let those go, who do I then become? I think that for some of us who have become sort of comfortable in that, and I was having this conversation with a friend of mine who's he's had a bit of a life, and he's gone through quite a bit of stuff, and now he was okay with himself, and he was saying, hey, well, like I'm okay with me. I don't want to change that, and if I let that go, then I'll become like this non-entity, this maybe hole in the middle of the donut, so what becomes of me? And looking at that and understanding what that really means, because it's really not who I am. It's just a mental construct of that I've carried around with me for so long. If I'm really willing to let that go, am I going to be okay? I have that connection with that on such a deep level that it's really uncomfortable in the beginning, I think, especially when you first look at that, to say, oh, okay, well, can I let this go? Am I willing to let this go? 12-step tradition talks about that, and it talks about in the 6th step talks about, am I really willing to let some of these things go? Of course, it's talking about defects of character. And defects of character are identified as anything that separates me from my higher power, separates me from my fellow man. So it really can be anything, and you could certainly substitute ego for defect of character. And the ego, as I'm identifying it, really is just a construct of the mind, you know, that separates me as an individual from the rest of the world. And I think we need a little bit of ego, you know, in our lives, you know, somewhere in our early infancy, to be able to separate us from our mothers and allow us to sort of, you know, learn and explore and grow in the world. But it certainly hasn't really done a whole lot for me over the last 20 years or so of my life. You know, it just led to more and more pain and more suffering. But it's interesting, you know, when I first started looking at that and asking myself whether or not I was willing to let go of that, it was really uncomfortable. And the answer in the beginning was no, I wasn't, you know, and was really afraid of, you know, what would become of me if I did. And it took me a good period of time to tell myself, yeah, I think I'm ready to do this, you know, and slowly over stages, you know, to sort of do that. So I understand. I understand, you know, that fear and that trepidation of, you know, what becomes of me if everything that I've known, you know, and I identify with falls away. You know, there's a lot of, you know, we fear the unknown, and that's the big unknown, isn't it? You know, I think one of the really cool things about the course was being able to have those experiences within the group, having an experience within the sort of the collective consciousness, and to see that, you know, I'm still me. I really am still me. It's a little like falling asleep at night. You know, I'm no longer sort of conscious of the world in the same way, but I'm still there. You know, I you know, still exist, and I don't cease to exist really. And I wake up the next morning, and you know, and I'm still there, and you know, and I can get up and do whatever it is I need to do. And so, having those experiences within the group, you know, I'm okay, I'm egotic me, and then, you know, we have the group experience, and then I'm not me, I'm, you know, I'm the no thing, and then I was me again, and to see that, you know, that was okay, and that I really liked that experience in the middle, and I was like, wow, hey, like, that's all right, that's a good thing, that's a really cool thing, you know, let me experience more of that for longer periods of time, you know, let me go deeper into that. And I think that was really, really key. It was very much inviting, you know. Let me give you a taste of something, and then see if you like it. And then if you really like it, you know, you can explore it deeper and more. And rather than just, you know, being afraid of it and not really knowing what it's going to look like, and you know, and having all that egotic sense of fear and identity, and you know, all that, you know, standing in the way of having this experience. It's just the most amazing experience. So the biggest downside, I think, really is facing that. For me, was just facing that, and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and allowing myself to kind of go through that. I can't really think of anything else that would really be a downside to PNSE. Maybe, you know, I could come up with something, give it enough, you know, length of time, but it certainly hasn't been my experience that there is anything that I miss about identifying with that stuff, those personal things, you know. I keep sort of reverting back to some work situations where I could easily see how Where before I would react in this very personal way, and today I just don't have that same reaction, and that's a blessing, And I would think that it would be a blessing for everybody in every situation.
Is there anything else that you can think of that you want to share or talk about or whatever that we haven't touched on yet?
The only thing that I would want to really share is just my personal gratitude. I'm just very grateful to have the opportunity to go through the course, to have the experiences, to have the continued experience, to be involved in the course, to maybe be involved in the course further. Everything that I've learned, all the stuff from God formula on through a lot of the middle stage stuff, and I'm able to help some of my coworkers identify where they're at. Although I don't necessarily say, on the continuum, it seems as though you may be, right? I think that that this course has not only benefited me, but everybody that I've come in contact with, and made my experience rich and deep and meaningful. And I think that has passed on, it's bled out, a little bit from me into each of those relationships that I have, and it's just been awesome. I love the energy that you have. I love your perception and your perspective, your teaching technique, your patience, your tolerance, kindness that you bring, and this wonderful focus to be able to sort of put it all together, in this way and transmit it. That is not something that everyone possesses. I think there's definitely some innate talent there, and then you couple that with surrounding yourself with just these awesome people that are helping you to spread this to the greater world, and I'm just very grateful to be a small part of that and have that as my own personal experience. It's just been really cool. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Along those lines, I mean, obviously, I'm also incredibly grateful, because the best system in the world doesn't mean anything if people don't show up with a certain earnestness and dedication and openness and everything else. And so it's awesome, not only that you were able to do that during the course, but also after the course. I mean, these are really, this type of sharing and this type of instruction and this type of sort of exchange, everything that goes along with facilitating the course or helping with the course, which is the phase you're in now, really. It's also very personal. And it's really, you have to be so open, I think, about the things that you've been through and all of that. And so, I'm tremendously grateful for you showing up, not only originally the way you showed up in the course, but also now, really, to help people moving forward. I think it's going to be really fascinating to see exactly what form this takes over time, and what the impact really is, and how wide the impact really becomes. All right, sir. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this interview. And I look forward to the days ahead and seeing how much we can help people, seeing how much transformation we can really produce out there.
Cool. Thanks, Jeffrey. You're very welcome.